It's not easy thinking about your thoughts, evaluating your evaluations, questioning your own questions. And I know what you're all thinking. إيه الكلام اللي ملوش معنى ده. The art of critical thinking is complicated and intimidating. I digress. However, by the end of this talk, I guarantee that you'll be able to think more critically than you thought you were capable of. But first, let's take a second to stop and define what critical thinking really is. No one ever takes a moment to reflect, try to figure out what this buzzword we see thrown around in schools, academic papers, job interviews, and basically any defining moment of your career really is. Well, ancient Greek philosopher Socrates thought that critical thinking was a manner of truth-seeking, a rational way of thinking, and an attitude of open-mindedness. It sounds complicated, I know, bear with me, we'll get back to Socrates in a moment. For now, we can define critical thinking as the analysis of facts to form a judgment. جميل قوي. إيه لازمة الكلام ده بقى؟ Practically speaking, critical thinking can serve to enhance and sharpen every single one of your skills and professional qualities. How, you may ask? Well, what really is a skill? It's a compilation of knowledge. Knowledge you've gained through experience, knowledge you've gained through learning, knowledge you've gained through reading. All that knowledge comes up to build up your skills. So, what better way to improve your skills than improve your knowledge? Let's take another look at our definition. Critical thinking is the analysis of facts. The analysis of, say it with me, knowledge. And so through critical thinking, you can reach a deeper understanding of the facts around you, a deeper understanding of the knowledge surrounding you. And that can serve to really improve, to really maximize the product, the fruit you're getting out of your skills. Practicality aside, we all have that little part of us that's always seeking the truth, right? That little voice that's never content with an incomplete story or a half lie, no matter how comforting it is or easy to live in, or how long we've believed it. That's where critical thinking comes in. Because through critical thinking, you reach that truth, you reach that certainty. And I'll explain how in just a moment. For now, let's do a little activity. Imagine a ship with large wood and sails and oars. And this ship is about to embark on a grand expedition across the world. When it reaches its first destination, the sails were all worn out. And so the sails were replaced with brand new sails. By the time it reached its second destination, all the wood of the ship had been battered from the sailing in the rough seas. And so that was also replaced. Now, by the time it reached its third destination, all the sailing had worn out the oars of the ship. And those were replaced as well. Now, every single part of the ship has been replaced. So let me ask you this. Is it still the same ship that started sailing all that time ago? Please raise your hand if you think it is. Okay. And please raise your hand if you think it isn't. Tamam. For those who said it is, let me ask you this. What constitutes whether or not it's the ship? It's clearly not any part we see of it. And for those who said it isn't, let me ask you this. At which point did the ship stop being the original ship and start being a new ship? It sounds complicated, right? Let's keep this question at the back of our heads. Remember Socrates? Brief background on Socrates. He was an ancient Greek philosopher known for his specific and numerous questions and his skeptical approach to the facts around him. Turns out, Socrates was pretty damn good at critical thinking. In fact, he kind of defined the entire concept. So, what can Socrates teach us about critical thinking? This is where we introduce the Socratic method. And trust me, through learning this method, you'll find that Socrates will be your best friend whenever you have that job interview or scholarship held up on your critical thinking skills. So what is the Socratic method? Well, as Socrates put it, it's a series of carefully chosen questions meant to examine the claims and premises of any argument. In simpler terms, it's choosing the right questions to test every part of an argument, whether it's the assumptions or the evidence or anything underlying an idea. And conveniently, Socrates categorized the Socratic questions into 6 types. Let's take a look at those. The first type is clarification, elaboration. إيه السؤال ده أصلا? And this one we use in our day-to-day life. It's obvious. It's questions like, what do you mean by this? Or can you give me an example of that? So let's apply this. Imagine you're interviewing for a job. And the interviewer asks you, how do you perform under pressure? So instead of answering right away, you stop and think to yourself, what do I qualify as pressure? What is an example of a time I've had to perform under pressure? And so through that, you reach a clear understanding of the question. The second type we have is assumptions, and this is one of the trickier ones. Because, well, it's pretty natural to make assumptions. It's in our nature. Because if you think about it, we don't really have the time to stop and question every single little detail about our lives. And so we make assumptions to speed things up. But this can prove dangerous, because ideas built on inaccurate or unreliable assumptions could prove to be impractical, or even just plain wrong. So what questions can we ask to eliminate this? What are you assuming by saying this? How did you come to those assumptions? What would happen if we assumed otherwise? Remember our ship? What did we assume when we asked the question, has the ship changed or not? Well, for the first part, we were assuming that the mast, sails, and ship and wood are all there were to the ship. Why wouldn't there, for example, be the name of the ship or the crew members on the ship? Evidence. And this is another one of the more obvious ones. And evidence has to do with proof, reasoning, all that stuff. So the questions based on, in this category, aim to draw out the elaboration, aim to draw out the proof, they aim to draw out the thought process behind ideas and arguments. So questions such as, how did you come to this conclusion? What proof do you have for this? How did you even come to this proof? So, in our ship, we were told that there was only the wood, the sails, and the oars. What proof do we have for that? So do we have proof that there's, for example, a mast or a steering wheel, a figurehead? We can't really know for sure until we have the proper evidence. Fourth, perspectives. This has to do with points of view, naturally. Questions regarding perspective have to do with where you're looking at something. There are things like, what point of view am I looking at this from? What source is this coming from? How is this source affecting the information I'm getting? Would it matter if it was a different source? So here I am, I'm your source for the information about the ship. Would it matter if someone else was your source? Would it matter if, let's say, your teacher was your source or your boss? Fifth, implications and consequences. This, as its name suggests, has to do with cause and effect. So, some questions would be, what effect would this have? What effect would a certain answer to this question have? What would be implied if this argument was true or not? And it also has to do with generalizations. So let's apply. What effect would it have? What difference would it make if the ship had changed or not? What would this imply? Can we generalize the answer we get to different objects that are changing in the same way? Sixth, finally, my personal favorite, questioning questions. It sounds complicated, bear with me. This is basically a compilation of all the previous questions applied to a higher degree, that is to say, to the original question we're asking. So, I was asking you, has the ship changed between the first and the third destination? Why was I even asking this question? What was the point of that question? What judgment could we reach through answering that question? Does the question matter? Is it important? حلو قوي الكلام. Now, in the spirit of the Socratic method, how does this all even relate to critical thinking? How do we even use these questions to think better? And that can be answered with two words: productive discomfort. I'll give you a second to think about that. Alright. Let's face it. The world is complicated. The world is usually unclear. It's ambiguous. It's not straightforward. Lots of twists and turns, lots of half-truths. And we as human beings, we seek the exact opposite. We seek straightforwardness. We seek certainty. We seek the truth. We seek clarity. And so our desire for these things can lead us into very dangerous traps. Traps of oversimplification. Traps of biases. The Socratic method helps to pull us out of these traps, to forcing us out of our comfort zones into a more productive, more clear area of thinking. That is to say, questioning your own assumptions, questioning your own motives, questioning your own biases, questioning your own self, questioning everything. Questioning everything. All right. So let's apply what we just learned with another problem. Imagine a trolley barreling on the train tracks towards 5 people, and there's no time for them to get off the tracks. However, you are standing at a lever. By pulling this lever, you can redirect the trolley so that it only hits one person. Should you or should you not pull the lever? Take a second to remember all the questions we just asked ourselves. Questions about clarity, questions about assumptions, questions about effects, questions about viewpoints, questions about evidence, questions about questions. It sounds complicated. It takes a while to get familiar with. But let's apply those here. How do you go about justifying or not justifying pulling the lever? There's no right or wrong answers. It all depends on your critical thinking. Thank you.